Hi, it's Pamela. Today we're going to follow on from the last tutorial where we had pattern selection and how to buy fabric and reading paper patterns, and this week we're going to be cutting out the fabric. I've made up one of the tops here. This is a good simple top for a beginner. A one-piece front, a two-piece back with a button fastening there. The neckline has a simple faced edge with some interfacing inside to give it some body and keep its shape. There is a little button closing at the top. There's also a little short sleeve. It's almost a cap, but it does go right the way around the armhole, so we'll learn how to do that as well. But for today, we're just going to be cutting out the pattern. So for that, we need our fabric. We need a little interfacing. I've got my measuring tape, pins, needle and thread scissors, fabric scissors, and the pattern. We might also need some sort of marker for our fabric. You could use chalk or one of the pens that fade. I've just got a propelling pencil here. That's all we need for this part. So from my pattern, I was able to ascertain I needed pieces 1 through 6 to make my top. As I say, it had all these fancy additions to the pattern, but I've chosen to just do a plain top at this stage. So I don't need any of the bows and flounces. I need a front piece, which will be cut on the fold so it opens out to be one full front piece. I need the back piece, which will have a cut edge, so we'll have 2 back pieces. I need a sleeve piece, and I need the neck facings. There's a front one which is cut on the centre fold, which goes round like that, and there's a back one which is cut with the opening that goes at the back there for the facings. That gives us a nice finished edge. Because it's such a curve, if we tried to fold that under, it would be all rumpled and we wouldn't get a nice smooth edge. So another piece, the same shape, is added, stitched on, and then flipped to the inside, so we get a lovely smooth finished edge round the neckline. So the next stage is we have to put the pattern pieces onto the fabric. So we'll do that next. So I've cut my pattern pieces to the size I want, which is a size 12. And you can see quite clearly round the edges which line belongs to each size. They're all numbered at regular intervals throughout. So I was able to cut out all my pieces on size 12, and that way we know they'll fit exactly. It is possible to veer in and out from a different size, but that would be a slightly advanced technique, and we're not going to worry about that today. We're going to just do the straight size 12. As I said before, on the last video, this pattern comes with different cup sizes, so each front piece for the different cup sizes is separate, and it's got a different shaped dart to accommodate your bosoms. Right, so I have my piece of fabric. It's been cut in the shop and we're ready to fold it. Mostly you will be cutting fabric when it's on the fold, and it's important to fold it correctly. They tend to be folded with the selvage edges, and that's the machine finished edge, and that's the way it drapes best. This is at the right way up, so the machined edges are at the sides. You see that? That's different from this is where it's been cut in the shop. So they tend to be folded right sides together. And you've got to make sure that it's folded straight, so that, and I can show you what I mean by when it's folded wrongly, it's slid along so that you can't see that, can you? Can you put the camera down a wee bit? So if I fold it off to the side, if I do it to an extreme, it wants to rope and it won't lie flat. So you've got to make sure it's lined up correctly that way also. And it's not always a good cut in a shop, it depends on how quickly the staff have been dealing with you. So there we are. we can make sure it's smooth and laid out nicely. And that's important because this is the way your garment will drape as well. So we always make sure it's nice and flat, the edges are even, and we can put a few pins on that to make sure it's lying nicely. There we are, just one or two pins along the edge so that it doesn't move while you're in the process. I did iron my fabric before I started because I got this folded and there was a pressed edge along here and it wasn't quite matching here. So I had to get rid of that fold so that I could refold it correctly. So there are layout sheets within the pattern and they're good suggested layouts for each pattern. Each fabric width they've got a suggested layout and they're worth looking at. It isn't always the most economical way. If you're doing the smallest size, it may work to push the pieces together more. So it tends to suit the biggest size that's included in the pattern. So what we're going to do is, we are referring to this, but I think we can probably do it more economically, because in this instance I've bought Liberty Tana lawn, which is 137 centimetres wide or 54 inches, which is normally a curtain width fabric. The normal cottons are 115 wide, so they haven't given me a layout for that one. So what I'm going to do is just lay them on fairly sensibly. I've got the arrows to follow and I can see that they fit in with plenty space, so that would work out fine. I've got plenty room for my sleeve down here. This one's to go to the fold and I can do that, and my neck piece will go there. So we'll measure them in correctly as we're pinning them, but I can see at a glance that I've got plenty fabric here to lie them out this way. Right, so of course you have to take into account the direction of the print on your fabric if you have a print. This is an abstract print and it almost doesn't matter which way up I go, as long as I'm consistent it will look fine. So make sure you do that. Make sure you've got, if you have a print, that you're consistent. You've got arrows on each piece of the pattern telling us the direction they should lie in, and that's so the fabric drapes properly. It would be wrong to put it on like that. It won't drape properly. So we've got to put it this way. And I'm going to start with my centre front and lie it against the fold. I know it's against the fold because the front on my top there, it opens out into one piece and it says here centre fold and the arrows are there. So I'm going to place this one first with a couple of pins, making sure it lies exactly on the fold. If I moved it to either side, it would drastically change the size of the garment. So you've got to make sure it is lying correctly there. And if I do three's probably enough on the fold because this isn't an edge I'm cutting. That's enough to hold it. Now I'm going to look at the back piece, which is not against the fold. It's got the selvage here. It is a straight piece, and I don't want to use the selvage edge because it tends to be a tighter weave. I'm not going to use that at all. I'm going to make sure I cut that off. Now, because there is a pattern, I told you not to get much of a pattern for a beginner's project, but because I have got a pattern, I'm going to line up these arrows and these arrows because that's a matching point. So if I have them lined up, then my pattern has a chance of that. If there's something, a bold part of the design, they will line up around the body. So I'm going to do that. And you can do that with a piece of paper or a ruler across there. As long as you're squared up with the edge and you get those lined up together, then your pattern will match, at least horizontally around the body. So I'll put a pin in at that point where it's matching. And I've got it away from my selvage, the machined edge of the fabric, and it's lying parallel to the edge. It's worth making sure that you're parallel to the edge. I think this is where a lot of cheaper garments look cheap, is when they're not cut straight. This is the straight grain line and it should be parallel to that edge. If it's not parallel to the edge, that's when you start getting strange squint garments that don't iron properly. I don't know if you've noticed that with some t-shirts, they sort of just want to lie all squint, and it's because they've been cut out squint. So that's a good way of doing it. Measuring, I'm not measuring the hairy edge on my selvage, I'm measuring from the clean edge, and that's 9 centimetres at one end of the arrow and 9 centimetres at the other. So I know that I'm straight there. So that's worth doing on every garment you do. And then I'll add a few more pins to hold it flat. Some people like to use weights on their fabric, and that works really well, especially if you've traced your pattern onto a heavy fabric. I find that the paper in the pattern packets is so light it floats about anyway, even if you've got weights on it, so I like to pin. So there we are. I'll put a few more in the front piece now that we've got them lined up. And a few extra pins where you're going round a curve, because that's more intricate to cut out. It is worth being accurate at this stage, your pinning and cutting, because it makes such a difference to your final garment. It's been someone's job to design these patterns. It's, takes them years to learn how to be a good pattern cutter, and there's no point in you just hacking around the carefully designed pattern. That's what you've paid for, getting a good pattern, so be very careful that you follow it. You can see by these lines at the sides where it's going up the different sizes. We've got a size 4 up to a size 12. You can see how small the difference is between each of the sizes. So it really is important that you follow the lines, because you will go crazily off size if you're not careful. Right, so that's the front and back on. Next I'm going to do my neck facings. Again, they've to be lined up so that they're parallel to the edge. The back one is going to be cut, so I don't want it right up to the fold, but I know that it's to be parallel to the fold. And do a few pins round that one. My pattern's been cut so many times and folded over to accommodate me doing different sizes. It's been a well-used pattern. I really should trace it out. One more in that, and the neck front facing is to be cut on the fold. Now the way it is, to get it the right way up, it would need to be upside down, if you see what I mean. So I'm going to turn it round, so I'm looking at the back of the pattern. I can't read it very well anymore, but I want all the pieces to be going in the same direction, so I'm reversing that piece of pattern, you see, doing it like that. So it is to the fold the way it's to be done, but it's turned over this time. There we are, and all we've got left now is the sleeve. And again, we want to make sure this grain line is parallel to the edge of the fabric. So this one's a bit trickier because it's further away from the edge. It's not so easy for me to see. So I'm going to stick one point of the pin in and measure over to the side. And that is 27 centimetres. So I'll come down to the other end of the line, and because I've only got one point in there, I can rotate the pattern piece so that until the other end of the grain line is lined up with 27 as well. So I'll put one in that end, and I'll go back here and check that yep, they're both at 27 centimetres from the edge, so I can put the pins in. So everything else is to be straightened out from that point. I think we're just about there. So that's us, that's it all pinned now. So the next thing we'll be doing is cutting it. So now I'm going to cut it out. It is worth checking at this stage that you've got everything that you need. Everything's in the right place. Your arrows are parallel to the edge. And then start cutting out. Do check, because if you've missed anything out, you may not have space for it, and you may need to adjust where things are lying. But I'm quite happy that I've got everything correct. So I'm cutting into my fabric with good sharp fabric scissors. Don't ever use your fabric scissors on paper, because they'll blunt really quickly. And make sure that you're following the lines of the pattern. You want to cut as exactly as you possibly can. I've got the pattern on the left side of the scissor. I find that easiest. Although sometimes, just because of the orientation, you may end up cutting with your pattern on the other side, but I find it's more accurate to do it this way. And we're being as accurate as we possibly can. As I said before, it's somebody's career to make these patterns. They've been worked out brilliantly, and we've got to follow the lines that have been drawn. There's no point in cutting away from the lines. And use good long strokes as far as you can, rather than be chopping into it. So the last piece of cutting I have to do is for the interfacing for the facings. It's just the two pieces, and I'm going to use a lightweight fusible interfacing. So the fusible part is the rough side, which is little dots of glue on the fabric which will melt under the iron and form a bond with the fabric. There's not a direction in this fabric, it's not woven the way other fabrics are. It's just bonded, so it sort of rips and tears in all directions. So it doesn't really matter about following the arrows with this one. I'm going to leave my fabric on it, and I'm just going to lie it on top, just somewhere that it fits. You can be as economical as you like with how you place them on the fabric here. So I've just left it on, and I'm pinning through the interfacing, reusing the same pins. And everything will be together and ready for me when I'm set to use them. So the only bit we have to remember is this part's to be on the fold again for the front neck edge, and then we can just cut it out. So we know these will be exactly the same size as each other, and they'll iron on beautifully. So everything's cut out now, and we've got to transfer the markings on the pattern onto our fabric. The first ones we'll take note of are the little arrows, the little triangles that are at the edge of the cuts, and they will help us place the shoulders to the shoulders, these ones here, so those will come together, and we know that that's a good match. The same at the side seams of the pattern, we've got arrows and triangles there, and those ones will match together, and these ones will help us match up the sleeve. So we've got to transfer them to the fabric before we take the pattern off. So this is a good stable cotton, it's not going to fray too much, and it's enough to do a tiny little cut within that triangle. That's all we need. Sometimes on these you get, as you go towards the back, you get more and more triangles together. So at the front they tend to be a single one, but to show us the difference between the front armhole and the back of the armhole, there's one cut on the front armhole and two for the back, and that will help us with the sleeve, which when you take the pattern off, it's difficult to know if it's your right sleeve or your left sleeve. And there is a difference in the curve. It's not a symmetrical pattern piece, and this side with the shorter edge is the back, and it's got two triangles towards the edge, so we have to cut into two little slices there, and that will match up with the two little slices that we make in the back armhole seam. So that will help us match everything up together. So they're really important to do. Some people like to cut a little triangle out with the fabric so that there's a little extra triangle cut on. I don't think that's necessary unless you're using something that frays an awful lot. Some wools you would benefit from cutting out the way, but I think when it's a fine stable cotton like this, you're absolutely fine to just cut in. It would add on tremendously to your work time to be cutting out the way rather than just a little snip. So go round them all and make sure they're all cut out, because they really do help. There's one there in the neck edge. That's all in two big pieces. Did I do that one? Yes. One there, one there. On the sleeve we've got the two, and we've got one here on the facings. I'm not sure that there are any on the facings. There should be one in the back. Yep, there it's there. So that's all the little triangles. Make sure you do all of them. Oh, centre back, there's three, because we're right at the back now. There's three together, and actually those two pieces of fabric that we've cut together will be joined together again leaving the reason there is a seam there is because there's a little opening at the back of the neck to help you get it on and off. So there's a seam right the way down the back. So this just helps us make sure we get it lined up correctly again. So that's all those markings. There are also lots of circles. They'll help us with the dart. And there are some markings, some circle markings round the top of the sleeve. So to transfer that marking, it's right in the middle of the fabric, and we can't cut into that or we'll just have a big hole in the top. So what we've got to do is make markings with either, some people use chalk marks and pencil marks. I find it just as easy to use a thread mark, and I do that with a big long double thread in a contrasting colour because I want it to show up. I want to be able to find it again easily and then easily remove it when I'm finished with it. So I go in through the centre of the hole. This is for the dart. It's a triangular piece that's going to be folded into itself to form the shaping on the bust. So we're going to go in to the centre of the hole and just out again. Keep both edges of the stitch within the circle. I'm going to leave a long tail and go through it again and pull your needle through, leaving a nice long loop. And we're going to cut through the loop and a nice long tail again. So it's a bit spidery there, but I've got nice obvious threads that I'll be able to find again when I'm ready for them. And again at these two sides at the seam edge of the dart, there's two markings, and I'll do the same again there. So I'll do that for all the little circles. I'm not going to need the ones here that are for the various flounces and frills that were on the top, but the dart one is important, so I've included them. So look through all your pieces and mark your little circles with your thread. So I've got all my little circles on now. I'm going to ask you to keep your pattern on your fabric until we're ready to sew, because you can lose track of what's going on. That the reason I did I'm going to take a few out the side here just to show you how we'll be able to cut this apart. When it's time to remove the pattern, having cut the loops on those threads, we can just pull the pattern off them, and you can see that the fabric's marked. Now because we've left such long tails, I can pull that apart and still have plenty thread on the front. It's not going to unravel, and I can snip between, and I've got the markings on both sides of the fabric, rather than having to mark everything twice. Now if you didn't leave long enough tails on your fabric, you won't be able to cut it like that. So we've got the markings on both sides and we'll be ready to go. There's another one there for the centre of the dart. I'll pull that out a wee bit and I can snip in there. But if you leave your pattern pieces pinned to your fabric till you're ready to sew, you won't lose track of what's going on. So we'll be back soon with the next stages.